Good morning, good evening. Thank you again for joining us. My name is Ravi, and I'm joining you from India, where it's currently 2:30 a.m. I appreciate you carving out time to join us in what I believe is actually a very significant, topic in terms of professional development, right? Um, Without further ado, we'll dive in. Um, I'd like Kara to introduce herself, and then we can dive into my introduction and the agenda.
Hi, everyone. My name's Cara Bonnington. I'm the Associate Director for Global Mobility at the University of Sydney. I've been in Sydney for 9 years, and before that, I was at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, where I worked in roles spanning study abroad advising, international internships, and risk management. I know that we have a couple of my colleagues on the call today and a few more familiar names, so it's great to see everyone. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, good to see some familiar names as well. Thanks, Kara. And we've been working with Kara and University of Sydney for at least 7 years now, or maybe slightly more, in various types of program formats. So again, my name is Ravi, and I'm the founder and CEO of Authentica. Authentica is an experiential learning company that has focused on programs that advance even sustainability development goals as well as career alignment. So we've been operating programs since 2013, and so far we have about 180 programs with 4,500 participants who've gone through our programs in different parts of the world. And we operate programs in about 25 countries. And we've also had the fortune of having hosted Kara's professional development programs in the past. So that, of course, is the topic for today. First, I want to kind of to go through a bit of an evolution of how the industry has changed. Um, don't worry, it won't take a long time, but it has changed quite rapidly, even in the last 10 years, and increasingly so in the last 5 years after COVID, right? And that accentuates the needs for certain types of skills that expected from us. We'll go through that. And we'll also look at the power of professional development programs, right? So we know that training is helpful. It helps us bridge the skill gap. But how does it exactly do that, and what outcomes can it have for us as professionals, and also for the institutions that we work for? And finally, I want to kind of introduce to you a program that we've developed that achieves exactly that. Basically, it's a professional development program for mobility, study abroad directors and mobility professionals for today's world. That I think is very contextually relevant. So, with that context set, let's kind of look at the evolving landscape of study abroad, right? So many things have happened. Um, First, basically, I feel is the move from traditional to innovative formats, right? So back in the day, all we had to do was advise students and have them connected to either an exchange partner or a study abroad program provider, our own program in location, and welcome them back when they get back. But now, we have full semester programs, exchange programs, 2 to 3 week intensive faculty-led programs that don't just stay in one place. They move to multiple places and sometimes multiple countries. There's micro credentials, there's virtual exchange, there's SDGs. There's so many different things that are happening, project-based learning, that there's been an explosion in innovative formats, and we still uh, have to support all of them within the context of education abroad. The second major shift I feel has happened is uh, there was value in just exposure, just getting a student from culture A to culture B and having them be in culture B for some time and then bringing them back. There was value already, but now there's obviously increasing demand to justify the investment in study abroad in terms of student outcomes. Are they kind of getting closer to a job? And also in terms of change, right? I mean, have we moved the needle on certain cultural competence skills, and can we demonstrate those shifts, right? Um, and the third is, of course, sustainability and inclusion. Increasingly, the vocabulary around carbon footprints, equity, inclusion have to be taken into account, both when we're designing the programs as well as when we're delivering it. And finally, technology is there. We have apps for everything from pre-departure to on-site support. We're doing VR orientations, especially post-COVID. And a lot of we have formats like Coil, where we have international cross-cultural teams on virtual projects. So all these things have happened, right? So fairly complex, and that has actually created a lot of pressure on the study abroad. I would say staff that is interfacing between students and faculty and institutions and providers and exchange partners. And Kara, maybe you can shed some light on how this has had an impact on your context.
Yes, absolutely. I know a number of you are joining from the US and are working in that context, and it is a bit different from Australia. I think some of the trends in the US have taken a little bit longer to get across the ocean to us. But for those of you working in the US context, you'll know that short-term programs, faculty-led programs have been kind of the dominant model for a number of years, and traditional semester-long models are a little bit less common, but it does vary across institutions and your own context. I know also many of us are working in central offices, so we're not working directly with academics. We're kind of in that service role to both the students and the academics on our campuses about how we work with them and how we support them. So it really does fall to many of us professionals in study abroad, student exchange, student mobility to know a lot about a lot of different parts of program development, program management, student support, how to incorporate sustainability into program design, how to work with local partners. And so there are, a number of additional demands for expertise that weren't there previously.
No, thanks, Kara. So this is obviously, a very different world that we live in. And what is done is actually it's changed the skill sets that demanded from mobility professionals. For one, we are no longer just coordinators. We have to be strategic in our thinking. And a lot of times we find ourselves guiding and advising faculty on what are some of the best practices, for doing programs, designing programs. Of course, the academics are still the faculty's domain, but there's so much more to programs now than the academics, right? Risk management and crisis response. Everybody must have heard the term VUCA world. So that has actually kind of changed, and with the wars that are going on, it has increasingly impacted how we get prepared proactively and not just be reactive. Just a simple example from Delhi. How do you kind of account for Delhi's air population? I mean, air pollution when you're designing programs, especially if you're going to be there in the winter time. So thinking about questions like that and collaboratively addressing them in program design as well as execution. Cultural intelligence, again, as brokers of, I would say, intercultural competence, we are also expected to, read the room, especially when it comes to dealing with different cultures. Think about negotiations with your exchange partners. When you're discussing pricing, and they're quiet, are they thinking, or are they disagreeing with what you're proposing on the pricing front? So there are intangible skills here that make a material difference to how effective you can be in your role. And similarly, DEI integrations, we've seen how certain homestay-based programs have to adapt, and both in terms of training on both sides to make it welcoming for LGBTQ students. Um, and finally, on the sustainability front, designing programs not just for safety but for social, environmental, economic sustainability of programs, especially with communities that you're visiting in mind. And these are just a few of the skills, dimensions of skills that we've seen are more are demanded from mobility officers. And Kara, I'm sure you've seen this happen, in your context, both, the skills that you've had to, develop, and the skills that you had your team to, develop in order to be relevant. Can you share a little bit more about what these demands are and how these skill gaps are impacting?
Yes, absolutely. So I think we all know who work in the field that having completed these experiences or having international exposure, living overseas, is kind of a credential in and of itself in the field. You know, it's helpful to have these experiences, but for some of us, maybe we had that experience 10, 20 years ago, and the context has really changed. So I know for my team, because we sit in a central area and we're trying to promote more faculty-led programming, diverse program types to be able to cater to a wide variety of students on our campus, it really does help to be able to speak from that authentic perspective about why certain choices are important, why when you're talking about risk management or when you're talking about you know, the ratio between staff and students traveling on a program, being able to say not only the ratio is, you know, 1 to 10, that's what we say at our university, but why is that important? Why do you need at least 2 people at the program at all time? What difference does it make for when you're delivering the program? So for instance, we always recommend that there's someone in addition to the academic leading the program, so that if something happens, if a student needs to go to hospital, if someone's feeling unwell, there's someone else to be able to continue on with the program and not compromise its delivery for the other students who are participating. But we're speaking from experience because we've managed those situations. Um, Even in my team, so I have a large team that looks after outbound student mobility, inbound student mobility, international agreements and partnerships. And we support our staff to go on faculty-led programming, even if it's not relevant to their immediate role, because we know that it supports our faculty, brings their costs down. Instead of supporting 2 people to go, they have someone coming from our team. But also we know that it's a professional experience for them where they're gaining skills that are relevant to this field, even if not in their immediate role, then maybe in something they want to do in their career moving forward. And I think some of the aspects that you mentioned that are becoming more of a focus in this programming, like diversity, equity, and inclusion and sustainability, these are challenges that we're all trying to tackle. No one's necessarily doing it 100% or have, you know, figured out the way to make it work. And so it's great to be able to come together in more of a group setting and figure out how to tackle these, what other people are doing, and
Mm,
how bringing these initiatives in really needs to be thought of at program conception, program design. So if you want to recruit students from diverse backgrounds, how is that going to affect the way that you structure the program and the way that you support those students when they're overseas? If you're trying to build in sustainability, how do you do that in an ethical, cost-effective way? What are the actual impacts? Is it, you know, tokenistic, or is it a way that you can really demonstrate the
mm,
outcomes and the values and how you integrate that into what you're talking about with the students? If they're staying at an eco hotel, say, do you talk about that with them? Do you explain, you know, how they can reduce their carbon footprint when they're in country? How do you do this in a more intentional way?
right. Thanks, Kara. And you also mentioned that you know the hats that a study abroad advisor would have to wear, you know, to be like almost like be experts, you know, on so many different things for the faculty and students. I mean, that's really where the skill gaps kind of become obvious, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the student support piece is one that's often talked about, but often um, it's one of those situations where you have to learn through doing. And I think everyone will know you're giving pre-departure orientations or talking to a faculty group, and everyone has their quote unquote horror stories or something that happened when they were overseas. And that really does help you understand how to navigate those situations. So going through it yourself, you know, something different is going to pop up on every trip. And so you try and be as prepared as you can, but some of it you have to navigate in the moment. But
Right,
having these previous experiences really helps prepare you and really helps you prepare others for when they're going to encounter these types of situations.
right.
So, for instance, I was traveling with a program in Vietnam in July, and it was a program that involved students from multiple partner universities as well. And the impetus for a lot of our partners was to bring students from diverse backgrounds, underrepresented students, those who were first in their family, to go to university, coming from a high financial need background. And some of these students had never traveled abroad before. And so being in Vietnam for 2 weeks was a really confronting experience for them. And they needed a different type of support than some of the other students who had traveled before. So it just helps you. The more exposure you have to these types of programs and what the experience is for the students on the ground, the better prepared you are to support them in future.
I mean, they say like knowledge is knowing what to say, and wisdom is knowing whether to say it or not. And that only comes from experience, right? So
Mm.
so yeah, I guess we've kind of gone through, the landscape that's kind of significantly shifted, and the skills that we are expected to kind of have, which is why continuous learning is no longer an option, right? So obviously we're building towards a case for a certain type of professional development program, but we're also kind of making there's data here that kind of shows across different conferences I've attended that increasingly intentional training is required to bridge these gaps. So again, we summarizing the challenges. The world has changed both in terms of post-pandemic, landscape, risk landscape, technology integration, right? So second is student expectations. So Gen Z demands a very different pedagogy. Their priorities are also shifting, both in terms of what types of programs they choose to go on and how they choose to kind of engage when they are on these programs. Mental health and wellness, today is serving those needs for students looks very different from 10, 15 years ago. And again, the demand for career integration is way more. Students are really demanding the ROI. And there are global pressures on SDGs and carbon accounting and DEI compliance that are required. And finally, of course, the professional development, right? So there's been at least in some markets, there's been some major reshuffles in the study abroad space. COVID obviously had shook us quite a bit, and it just means that for us, we have to keep running hard just to stay where we are. So, and ideally we want to be basically moving forward as leaders, as decision makers, and adding more value to the ecosystem. So for all these reasons, we feel that continuous learning is no longer optional, and it needs to be a priority for educators as well as institutions who are engaging the educators. So perhaps maybe Kara, you can talk a little bit more about how you addressed this in the past when you were faced with these contexts.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, as some of you on the call know, I know we have a few alumni joining today. In 2017, a colleague working in the field in Australia, who was managing a third-party provider at the time, and I developed a professional development program, which we called STAMP, which was an acronym for the Study Tour for Academics and Mobility Professionals. So it's similar to the Impact program that Authentica is running. And the goal of this program was really to achieve a lot of different goals across the sector in Australia. So one was to be able to advocate for a program type that we knew was desirable for students, that we knew would work for students, but we were meeting resistance from academics, from administrators in the field. And that's short-term faculty-led programming. I'm sure a lot of you are working in this space, and maybe there's strong support at your institution, but we were hitting a bit of a challenge where we kind of had to advocate that short-term programming, even a week, 2 weeks in length, can be really academically rigorous, can be really impactful and transformative for students, can be designed intentionally. It's definitely more cost-effective for students.
Mm.
And we also, all working from a practitioner standpoint, you run up against that perceived divide between academics and the practitioners, and both, are coming with a different set of expertise and skill sets. And so getting both of those roles within the same program was a really strong goal for us. The other was to provide an opportunity for practitioners to kind of walk a mile in their students' shoes, really understand what is the student experience when they're going on these short-term programs. You know, we hear a lot of people complain about students not doing the readings, not following instructions, and maybe, you know, when they showed up on the stamp program, maybe they hadn't done the readings themselves. Maybe they were asking a lot of questions that we, you know, kind of roll our eyes at when we get them from students thinking, read your emails. This is what I told you already. But also we had some comments. So the first stamp program was in Hanoi in Vietnam. And then we ran our second one with Authentica in Mumbai in 2019. But we had some comments from academics who have led faculty-led programs before or have been working in the field for a number of years saying, actually, you know, this program is really tiring. It's making me think I need to build in more downtime for my students to make sure
Yeah.
that they're taking care of themselves. Or, I didn't consider some of these aspects about how we can incorporate different elements into the program. Or, you know, in my program, I thought we had to be in the classroom for at least 5 hours a day. But now I'm seeing that when you're out in the community, you can have these conversations and you can weave in the content, but they're actually seeing it face to face as well and giving more chances for that cultural exposure and those authentic learning experiences. So we wanted to find a way to bring all of these elements together. And the feedback from STAMP was really strong. As I mentioned, we have a couple of STAMP alumni on the call today who maybe we'll have time for them to chime in a bit later if they're keen. But I think one of the benefits of these programs is that they're appropriate for staff with multiple experience levels because it becomes a learning community. We want people who are new to the field, who've never been on this type of program before, to live it, to see what it's like. But we also need the academics, the practitioners who have been doing this for a number of years to be able to feed in and provide their perspectives as well. And it also provides an opportunity for you to learn from your colleagues who are there. You know, one of the models of this type of learning is often the pre-conference workshop, where maybe you get a full day sitting in a room with colleagues from different areas, learning about a topic. But this is, you know, 5 full days of that type of format. And so you really get to have those deeper conversations and explore those topics that maybe came up over a coffee break or over a lunch. You can say, hey, you mentioned that you do things a little bit differently at your institution. Can you tell me more of that? I think we often get locked into our mentality of, you know, my university is special and unique and things don't work that might work in other places. But you really get a chance to unpick that and understand maybe there are different ways of doing things. We haven't explored that approach before. Maybe that's something we can implement at our institution.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm just going to run a quick poll if I can figure out how to do this. Um, to see if what's the level of experience with professional development programs. So you will see a poll come up on your screen. Can you see it? Yeah, I can see the responses coming in. Great. So there are three, I mean, I guess three real choices, right? I mean, classroom-based workshops, like what Cara was mentioning, can be half a day, full day. It could even be multi-day, but mostly you're doing it within the classrooms. And then there are field-based experiential format workshops, and some of you may have done both, which is great. So we have about 75% participation. I'm just going to give it 8 more seconds, and then we can see the results of the poll. It'll be pretty interesting. So if you still haven't responded, just go ahead and please kind of select. Yeah, there you go. So I'm going to share the results here. Hopefully you can see this. About 56%, slightly over half of the room have done the classroom-based workshops. About a fourth haven't done any other types of professional development workshops. One person has done immersive field-based workshop, and 4 people have done both. So, which is great. I mean, like this is natural, right? Because field-based, multi-day, larger investment of time, and correspondingly, the financial, and you have to be away from your job to do that. So, which is part of the problem, right? There's a story where one guy was chopping a tree with an old axe, and another guy was telling him that, hey, why don't you sharpen your axe? You can cut your trees down faster. And that guy said, no, I don't have time, so I have to keep, I can't take a break to do this. So even though it would have, made things faster, maybe it's a little bit anachronistic example. We don't want to be chopping down trees anymore. But it's the classic problem that, it's a chicken and egg situation. So with that in mind, right? I mean, these kinds of professional development programs that really are immersive, where you get to walk in the shoes of a student to not only experience what they are about to experience, but also learn, intentionally through the process, right? There'll be workshops, and then you'll have the experience, and you'll have reflection and debrief with your peer group, and lots of opportunities to kind of apply what you're learning back in the field the next day. So we believe that these are some of the benefits of doing a program like that. The immediate impact is, of course, that you go from theory to practice, and then you go into real world problem solving, and these are tools that you can actually implement pretty much immediately. Career acceleration. So people who kind of are able to demonstrate high competence not only are able to achieve certain outcomes for the students and faculty, they're also able to kind of network within the industry, and you'll see how that actually kind of helps. Obviously, program innovation capabilities, because you have been you walked in the shoes of the students, and you can actually kind of design programs better for these multiple outcomes. Tons of networking opportunity from peers as well as industry connections. And finally, for the institution, what it means is that you're able to amplify and improve the program quality. So, which means stronger feedback for faculty. These programs fill and they run the next year, and overall, it actually is a win-win for students, faculty, and the institution. So, these investments are actually quite worth the time and money that it takes to do it. So with that context illustrated, do you want to add anything more on the benefits, Kara?
I will say one thing, which is that I think these types of programs have a greater outcome in terms of capacity building across the institution than a traditional half day or full day workshop. I think you could sort of imagine going to a workshop and thinking, oh, that was good, that was relevant, I can take this back to my role. But you wouldn't necessarily bring it up for multiple years on end and refer back to it when you're talking to academics or people outside of your office. Usually, it's a little bit more contained in its scope of relevance. With these types of programs, you learn things that you then pass on to other people in the office, to academics that you're working with, designing programs, talking about budgeting. You'll talk to students about your experience. And I think it really translates very well to a kind of train the trainer kind of approach
Right.
where people are passing on that learning more actively.
Right. And I think a very good case study is Western Sydney University. The mobility director, not only came on this impact stamp program himself, but he brought in a faculty who's never designed and offered a study abroad program before he attended stamp. So Dr. Kishan Prasad, he taught in the business school. So after the professional development program, he went on to become the most prolific, designer of faculty-led programs. He won awards within the institution, and also multiple grants to subsidize the students' cost of attending these programs. So, true case of how from a capacity building and evangelizing perspective, bringing in a faculty on these kind of programs is really kind of turns on a tap that was not open. And we know for faculty-led programs, you really need more faculty to come onto this side and offer these programs. So with that said, I want to basically introduce the Impact program. Impact stands for International Educator Mobility Program for Collaborative Transformation. Has quite a mouthful, but it makes for a cool acronym. And this is being offered March this is the first edition for us, Authentica, to do this. We have done it for Cara in the past through the stamp program. This is being offered in New Delhi. It's right after the API conference. So if you happen to be attending the API conference, it's literally on the last day the API conference ends and this program starts. So it just needs kind of adding on a few days. And it basically starts in Delhi and ends in Delhi. We go from Delhi to Agra, Agra to Jaipur, and Jaipur back to Delhi. So the key aspects of this program are, number one, it's immersive, right? It's not just workshops. You actually are developing a live program. You know, you will actually kind of get exercises where you have to develop mini components of a live program. Real-time crisis management simulations will be done along with accompanying the theory, right? And you'll be working alongside successful program directors from different universities. And also, so these workshops are led by pioneers either in sustainability or DEI. So very qualified people who are in the study abroad industry who will be delivering these workshops, and the entire thing has a very practical focus. So there are more details on our website. We'll just kind of share a link to it. The idea is that we translate all of these demands in terms of skill gaps that we have, developing in the study abroad space to into a program that bridges these gaps. So effectively on this program, what you'll be learning is design thinking for developing new program designs, risk assessment, partnership building. So we are actually going to be visiting 3 community organizations and also 1 academic institution in order to kind of discuss how the vision that you have can be actually translated downstream. Um, and DA implement strategies as well, especially like Kara was mentioning, this program is really tiring for me. I need to kind of do a better job of, taking care of my students' downtime. And what you'll be creating is you'll be creating your own program sustainability plan, right? I mean, different institutions and different people are at different stages of their professional development, so it'll be customized. And regardless of where you are in terms of risk management protocol, you'll move the needle yourself. And finally, the partnership development with different types of stakeholders. And it is designed for you to have these 5 outcomes: enhanced program management, risk management, sustainability practices, DEI strategies, and network building. So those are all the aspects of the program and you can find more details on the website. Again, we highly encourage you to consider doing immersive programs like these. And of course, this is one such option. There are many more out there. There are programs in Africa, programs offered by SIT as well in terms of professional development. All of them are designed to be immersive. So with that said, it'll be great to kind of take some questions and maybe some comments from past participants. You can unmute yourself and ask questions, or you can raise your hand and we can unmute you. You can also type in the chat. There's a question on what are good resources to learn about fundraising initiatives for study abroad programs. Elizabeth, can you clarify, is that for professional development or for the students?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I was thinking more on like like group-based, let's say a faculty-led group going abroad.
Mhm.
What would be some fundraising ideas or fundraising tools that the group, maybe the faculty can use to lead the group and try to find some additional money, especially for I speak from a small liberal arts university where a lot of students haven't traveled abroad and they are really concerned about finances. So, what are some tools that our faculty could use um, to just get funds to reduce the cost of programs?
Right. I mean, I can share some resources with you. There are Pell Grants. I mean, depending on what type, is it need based? Is it a marginalized community based? There are many types of grants that are available for certain types of like first generation college goers. There are grants available for that. So different donors have sort of different criteria, and there's Boren Scholarship for STEM-based, study abroad programs. So maybe I can send you a list if you don't mind, dropping me an email that will elaborate on these scholarships for faculty to raise money to subsidize the cost of student attendance. Kara, you have any other thoughts?
I mean, definitely consider what grant funding exists. I know in the US it's maybe a little bit less structured, but there may be some grant funds available that you can apply for. I'd also recommend students look at the Fund for Education Abroad. It's a philanthropic organization that provides funding for students to have these experiences. And I think Joelle on the line might be from FEA. Is that right, Joelle?
Yes, I sure am. I can pop my email in the chat if folks have questions.
Yeah, please do. It's a great organization that students can apply for directly. So that's something to consider as well. I will also just plug that I believe institutions need to be investing in these programs and try. I know it's quite difficult, especially at times like these when lots of budgets are tight, support for international education is kind of struggling. But if it's aligned to, the mission and the goals of the university, then the university needs to advocate for these programs and provide a decent level of funding. We've come up with a few different models at the University of Sydney where, for instance, if it's the travel is part of an academic credit program, then part of the tuition funding is offsetting the cost of the program. I'm sure this is happening at other institutions as well. We're fortunate that we have a large bank of scholarships, and we're also trying to fund directly the faculty-led program side of things. So we have a grant scheme for programs that are delivered sustainably or have an academic sustainability focus. And that's a $10,000 grant that's provided by my office to programs, and they apply on an annual basis for that funding to offset the cost of the program and incorporate more sustainable aspects. We know that often more sustainable products, hotels, things like that have a higher price tag. And so we're trying to reduce that financial barrier to sustainability. So talk to your institution about some of those different options, and don't be afraid to think outside of the box either.
Right. And also look at the websites of SIT in their FAQ and resources, World Learning. So they have actually compiled a pretty good list of scholarships, and you can also find it from our website if you go to the FAQ site and look for scholarships. You'll kind of see a bunch of resources that we've shortlisted. I mean, they're not scholarships that we provide necessarily. They're just different types of scholarships available for US-based institutions. Cool.
And can I add one more thing there?
Yeah.
Hello. So you may be aware of the IDEAS grants that the U.S. Department of State offers. Now, I think those grants are explicitly not for student funding, but it does help to establish programs and make programs happen. So that's a federal government program to also look into for those of you who are in the USA, which I am not. And I wanted to speak up because I attended the STAMP program in India in 2019. In a previous life, I'm now in Norway, but when I lived and worked in Australia, I did the program, which was an amazing experience for me in my career. And I just wanted to point out a few things that kind of I took away from the program and things that I hadn't really thought about before is just how the day-to-day operations work on the ground for these sorts of programs. When you're thinking about learning outcomes and risk management and all that, that's quite high level things, but you don't really think about, what does it look like on the ground? How are we getting from point A to point B? Who's managing when we're, stopping to use the bathroom. I mean, these are basic, human necessities that I think if you're sitting at a desk planning a program, or if you're an academic planning a program, who you're focusing on your actual field of studies, those little minute details are so important, because if they get missed, then it blows up into an absolute crisis. So I think that was my biggest takeaway from the program, and how it helped me to better manage making these programs go from pie in the sky ideas to actually being successful for students.
Oh, it's a
Thanks,
great
Heidi. It's
point,
nice to
Heidi.
see you again.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Taking into account jet lag when you're scheduling orientation sessions or welcome dinners, small things, the devil is in the details, and being on a program like that absolutely kind of drives it home into your system. Thanks for sharing, yeah. Any other questions about any of the, experiences that Cara and I have shared so far? Okay. Great. I hope you got some value from the session, and thank you again for taking time to join this. I would imagine, Heidi, it's not a very convenient time for you in Norway. Appreciate you kind of hopping on. And
No, I'm happy to be here. It's almost 11 p.m. So
yeah, okay. Awesome. We'll share the recordings with you all, and also with and the PowerPoint to all the people who registered for the event. Thanks again for joining, and look forward to seeing you hopefully at API and hopefully Impact program in Delhi. Heidi, come on over.
I would love to. Thank you.
Thanks, Kara. Appreciate your time.
Yeah,
Morning.
thanks,
Have a great day.
Goodbye.
Bye.